Buenos días a todos. La Universidad de Monterrey, a través del Centro Roberto Garza Sada de Arte, Arquitectura y Diseño, les da la bienvenida al 12º Congreso Internacional de las Escuelas de Arte y Diseño y de Arquitectura y Ciencias del Hábitat, Udesign ECO. El día de hoy nos acompañan Alejandro Fernández Garza, presidente del Consejo del Centro Roberto Garza Sada de Arte, Arquitectura y Diseño, directivos UDEM, directores y directoras de los departamentos y programas académicos que conforman las escuelas de arte y diseño y de arquitectura y ciencias del hábitat de la UDEM, así como alumnos, maestros y público en general. En esta ocasión, Udesign se enfoca en el tema eco. Las ondas se van expandiendo y van evolucionando con el tiempo, de forma que nuestras acciones tienen repercusiones en nuestro entorno. Es un fenómeno el cual tiene un mismo origen, pero va cambiando con el ambiente y el tiempo. Un diseñador empieza gritando, pero si no hay nadie que lo escuche, ¿produce algún sonido? Necesita encontrar quienes estén dispuestos a no solo escuchar, sino también a gritar. Las ideas, al igual que el sonido, rebotan y se amplifican. Para que un sonido llegue lo más lejos posible, uno pensaría que hay que ir en línea recta. Pero cuando la meta es hacer que el sonido llegue a todas las partes, debes de asegurarte de que este rebote en todos los lados rebote en todos los lados posibles. Esa es la única manera en la cual el sonido y la idea pueden sobrevivir. Se necesita a un equipo que se encuentre en diferentes lugares, con contextos y puntos de vista distintos, dispuestos a seguir este grito. Al ser tantos gritando en tantos los lados, ya no hay cómo evitar el sonido. Un llamado solitario se ha convertido en una ola de ecos que inevitablemente sonarán en todo el mundo, cambiando cómo se siente la gente. El poder del impacto depende del volumen del primer aliento, o bien de la potencia de los amplificadores, unificados que hagan lo posible por mantenerlo vivo. La fuerza de una armonía compuesta por distintas voces no solo se sostiene firme, también invita e inspira a aquellos que no lo buscaban. Este año, Udesign tiene muchas sorpresas y actividades paralelas en estas 2 semanas intensivas de arte, arquitectura y diseño, como por ejemplo el UDraw Challenge, que es un reto de diseño en nuestras cuentas de Udesign UDEM y foryou.crgs en Instagram, sesiones de revisión de portafolio con profesores del CRGS, un mercado de diseño en línea que está conformado por marcas de diferentes alumnos y egresados de las escuelas de arte y diseño y de arquitectura y ciencias del hábitat, el UWork, que es una exhibición digital de proyectos de nuestros alumnos que ustedes pueden encontrar en udesign.edu.mx, /Udesign. Tenemos muchos talleres impartidos por profesores del CRGS y también nuestra gran novedad de esta edición es el podcast Udesign Enco, que pueden encontrar a partir de mañana en nuestra cuenta de Spotify Udesign UDEM. Como aviso general, les digo que al ingresar a la presente sesión de Udesign, los participantes entienden y aceptan que sus datos personales e imagen podrán ser divulgados por la Universidad de Monterrey para los fines aquí descritos. La sesión será grabada y almacenada para conformar un repositorio que servirá para futura consulta y referencia de la Universidad de Monterrey y podrá ser difundida para fines informativos y otros relacionados con promoción. El acceso al material y contenido de la presente conferencia no implica una licencia gratuita para su uso, por lo que deberán respetarse en todo momento los derechos de autor. La información compartida no podrá ser transmitida, grabada ni divulgada en ninguna forma a ningún tercero. Las opiniones expresadas en esta sesión son responsabilidad de cada participante y se solicita realizar este intercambio de ideas y opiniones con tolerancia y respeto. Los invitamos a ver todas las ofertas que tenemos para ustedes en el mercado de diseño también, que no se olviden. Es muy importante también siempre divulgar el trabajo que nuestros alumnos y egresados están haciendo. Asimismo, agradecemos a los directores y coordinadores que hicieron posible este evento y queremos hacer una mención especial al Comité de Alumnos for You, ya que esta edición de Udesign ha sido organizada por ellos. Ellos son Simón Sea, Kimberly Romero, Rebeca Ruiz, María Fernanda Serna, Ignacio Fernández, Carolina Aguilar, Aide Abigail Martínez y María Ángela Reyes. Ahora invitamos a Rebeca Ruiz y Kimberly Romero a dar un mensaje.
Hola, buenos días. Soy Kim, vicepresidenta.
Y yo soy Rebeca Ruiz, secretaria.
Nosotras somos parte de For You, estudiantes que apoyamos a la cultura integral del CRGS a través del macroevento Udesign. Y nos complace darles la bienvenida a la 10ª edición de Udesign 2021, que es posible gracias a todas las personas que nos apoyaron.
En esta ocasión, como mencionó la maestra Alessandra Perlati, partimos desde la noción de que las ideas, como el sonido, rebotan y se amplifican. Así que surge la pregunta, si un diseñador empieza gritando, pero no hay nadie quien lo escuche, ¿realmente produce algún sonido?
Con la finalidad de amplificar la diversidad de orígenes, contextos y puntos de vista distintos. Les presentamos las actividades que buscan mostrar la potencia de las particularidades de las distintas disciplinas que ofrece el CRGS.
Las conferencias internacionales, como en la que nos encontramos en esta inauguración, son abiertas a todo el público, al igual que la exposición de Your Work, el mercado de Design Market y el nuevo podcast You Know. Invitamos a todos los estudiantes de la comunidad UDEM a que participen tanto en los talleres como en el concurso de UDraw de Instagram y a los estudiantes del CRGS a que participen en los portfolio reviews.
En nombre de For You, gracias por asistir.
Esperamos que realmente este espacio los inspire a crear su propio eco. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, equipo For You. Muchas gracias, Rebeca y Kim, por el mensaje y por todo el trabajo y todas las horas ahí que pusieron todo el equipo en los últimos, ni sé cuántos meses, fueron muchos. Y también agradecemos al equipo de alumnos de diseño gráfico que realizaron la identidad de Udesign Eco, liderado por su directora de programa, Arranza Rivera. Son Aide Abigail Martínez, Raúl Amezaga y Daniela Rodríguez. Y finalmente agradecemos a Mauricio Guerra Bonilla, Macbo, alumno de la licenciatura en Animación y Efectos Digitales de la UDEM, y JP Music Studio, quienes realizaron el video de introducción con musicalización y animación de esta sesión. Me permito pasar un video de parte de Carlos García González, vicerrector de Educación Superior.
¿Cómo se escucha la voz de los diseñadores, artistas, innovadores y arquitectos en un mundo tan ruidoso? El año 2020 sin duda fue un año de adaptación y crecimiento, y el 2021 nos seguimos adaptando y encontrando respuestas de una manera que jamás hubiésemos imaginado antes. La creatividad y la inspiración han tomado un rol muy importante en plantear soluciones en esta nueva normalidad. ECO es parte de esta afirmación, creando espacio en donde se reúnen grandes talentos dispuestos a mostrar que sus ideas, como el sonido, rebotan y se amplifican. Agradezco a los conferencistas que formarán parte de este Udesign 2021 y esperamos que ustedes logren inspirarse con sus intervenciones. Me gustaría invitarlos a que sigan pendientes de las actividades que tienen en Udesign Eco y lleven sus proyectos hacia ese anhelo máximo que ustedes persiguen. Es un placer acompañarles y es un honor de mi parte trabajar con gente tan comprometida como el cuerpo de consejeros, directores, coordinadores y profesores que forman el Centro Roberto Garza Sada de Arte, Arquitectura y Diseño de la Universidad de Monterrey. Agradezco también especialmente al Comité de Alumnos For You y al comité organizador, quienes hacen posible este gran evento. Por último, hoy, 20 de septiembre del 2021, declaro formalmente inaugurado el presente congreso Udesign Eco. Muchas gracias y que disfruten de Udesign Eco.
Muchas gracias al comité de alumnos y al doctor Carlos García González. Antes de iniciar, les queremos invitar a que si tienen preguntas durante la sesión, pueden escribirlas en el chat y daremos lectura al finalizar la sesión. Los invitamos a realizar este diálogo con respeto y conforme a los valores que nos caracterizan como miembros de la comunidad UDEM. Les agradecemos su colaboración. Les voy a platicar y leer la semblanza de nuestros conferencistas. Jiten Thukral y Sumir Tagra trabajan en colaboración con una amplia gama de medios que incluyen pintura, escultura, instalaciones, juegos interactivos, video, performance y diseño. Thukral y Tagra trabajan en nuevos formatos de participación pública e intentan expandir el alcance de lo que el arte puede hacer, enfatizando aún más lo que la práctica puede hacer en un contexto virtual a través de sus archivos y publicaciones. Ellos rompen el mundo de la mediated disciplinary, creando narraciones sensoriales y multimodales en entornos inmersivos. Su trabajo anterior se ocupó de las tropas de migración, narrativas mitológicas, símbolos de la identidad india y motivos de una cultura globalmente manifestada que anima un área en gran parte pedante y estática de la material cultural. De un personaje visual pop a un enfoque visual predominantemente abstracto y una filosofía compositiva, Thukral y Tagra constantemente cambian en términos de gramática y vocabulario. Han ofrecido comentarios sociopolíticos que están implícitos en su estética durante los últimos 18 años. Recientemente buscan identificar la práctica como pedagogía a través de su colaborativo polinatorio, laboratorio interdisciplinario, que cultiva un ecosistema de aprendizaje inclusivo que indexa para lograr el intercambio de conocimientos a través de la polinización cruzada. Recibamos a Thukral y Tagra Studios. Thank you, Thukral and Tagra. You have the stage now. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, good
Hi.
morning. Yeah, we heard the English version of it and it's fantastic. We wish we could actually hear the Alexandra speaking and understanding as well at the same time. Yes. Yeah, what time is it right now? Morning, 10 o'clock?
10:17 a.m.
So we have 8:47, almost 8:45. So yeah, I mean, we're really looking forward to, 1 second. Yes, can you see the screens?
Yes, yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting us. Both of us are really excited to narrate our studio stories. And at the same time, it is basically a long day of work. So it is interesting to kind of have this always interacting with students. It gives another dimension, and we also learn from every time we speak. So thank you for the invite. So our studio actually is built in a format of a conversation, and it is a building which we build up looking into a very powerful space so that we can actually incorporate ourselves as we evolve. This is 8 years back when we started building it. And we tried to kind of design each and every bit of it. And it is interesting for us, we saw it as a visual and like a living sculpture that will be inhabiting it for years to come. And this is built up near New Delhi. So the airport of New Delhi, that's the capital of India. And we are just about near to the airport. And you see when the city grows, people grow, we move out to the airport. and near to the suburbs of it. So this is where a normal day in the studio looks like, that we actually just go in the morning, and the pieces you see on the right side of the building are pieces which are leftover stone blocks while we were making the studio. So, and we try to bubble wrap them as much as we can. And we try to build up a new language for us to sit outside and enjoy the weather. However, it is of extremely hard weather, but some days are good. So this is one of the rooms where we walk in. As you see, there are a lot of stuff going on, from publications to a game board design on the floor, on the board, from paintings, oil on canvas on the light side. And then if you see, there are more sculptures and objects which we live with every day. So our education, both of us actually come from a fine art background, and then we learned design at the same time, meaning that first half of our education was fine arts and the second was information design. And we both started working in that way, that our studio started oscillating between social design and fine art practice. And this is a quite rare exercise where it actually crosses multiple disciplines. It moves into space design. Of course, it is a work of art as a canvas, oil on canvas. As we go up to the studio, we're going to talk more about it. But we also realized that we wanted to do too many experiments. And we both started working with this idea that we must not sit comfortable. As the moment artist sits comfortable, he actually moves and dissolves into an exercise which is completely opposite to experiment. And we both, since now it's 18, 19 years of working together. And we started experimenting since very early on. Jason, would you like to speak a little?
Earlier, we started working as a visual dialogue. So we used to share each other the work. Suppose even if in a different city, so I'll take some picture, I'll send it to him by email. He will send back me the image with a drawing on the image. So this is how we started sharing our ideas on early days. So eventually we realized we have some 428 images. Then we made a small, that was the first work of ours. And the email was very new. I'm talking about 2000, when 99, 2000, when you can send 500 KB email
as an attachment.
Image as attachment. So we realized in a 1 year's time, we had around 428 works ready. And then we published our book, of a very small 1 inch by 1 inch book, which has 428 pages. And that was our first project as started.
So, I mean, these are the shots which we took one of the days, and we wanted to show the studio because of the lockdown, many things changed, and then this document actually becomes a walkthrough through our spaces. It's a very candid exercise to do. As you see that we're just walking up to the studio. This is where a normal day looks like. Mostly the entire space is inhabited to whatever comfort height we want to sit on making the work. The scale of the work was decided because we were two people working together, and we actually thought that we need at least like space for arm stretching, and that's how the larger studio, need of the larger studio space developed. Now, this very early on when we started putting all the pictures, all our 3D, all our drawings in a simple sketchbook as we speak. We constantly keep writing little ideas. From there, it actually develops into a larger visual imagery. And once it is done, we project it onto the canvas and start working by drawing the entire exercise. Takes almost sometimes 2 months. And this is where we learn a lot from our mistakes. This is just the other side of the space. While we were in the lockdown, we actually we were lucky enough because we could access the studio at our speed. And we started working on a couple of works which are very large because there was no exhibitions, no traveling. And we realized that, you constantly think about future and how speculative and how much you're interested in developing ideas for people to come to see it. One of the important aspects of the work has been migration, and we've been actually making works which are constantly defying gravity, moving up in the space. There is a kind of a little bent of science fiction, but the understanding is extremely from stories and narratives which we hear from our peers and from our family histories. These are all a mix of ideas which actually comes together. One of the reasons of using the idea of play, which we actually started using it from last 4 years now, is that in one of the interviews we were just talking about how two people can work together. So it is basically a constant practice session, and the entire exercise kept coming as playing a table tennis match. How you kind of constantly bounce the ball. And we went a step ahead to make new table tennis tables. So by now there are I think 25 to 26 tables. In the future, in the more slides, you will actually end up seeing it. This is one of the works which started having one of the tables in painting. And if you see, there are 3 larger parts of the work. One is in the sky, one is the water, and one is the land. And things are melting, and we were quite, thinking about that everything is melting down in terms of, there is this very interesting lecture. Everything solid melts into the air, and it is coming from our value systems when things started changing last year. And this is one of those mental mapping, as you see. There is a lot of metaphors to the idea of drifting away, and we were quite moved, as everybody was, in terms of how the crisis and the pandemic actually shaped.
So the last painting you saw, that is a show going on right now in Delhi. Probably this is the first physical show open in past 2 years in India. I mean, our show,
Yeah.
So it was, for us, it was excitement, but on the other part, there were very few people as the COVID thing has changed a lot of things.
Yeah, in terms of also the ideas of sharing constantly shifts its form. We used to come to the universities and speak about the works, have exhibitions all across the world. More than, all the time, we are actually spending less time in the studio and spending more time in traveling and exhibiting. And this is completely reverse, which is interesting in a way. I would not say fantastic, because pandemic is not, there's no delight about the pandemic. It's just that you are kind of reconciling, looking into your own self a little more than ever, spending your time with your families. So this is just a visual of another day, but more or less the scale of the paintings, that every painting has this kind of a larger scale which immerse the person. The idea is that, it is larger than life. So it's beyond, mostly it is 6 feet. So, after the first half of the the tiny presentation or quarter of it, we question ourselves that, now and then, that what are we trying to achieve through our practice? And these are very relevant questions as, as a practitioner, we have to constantly keep a check on our own self. We have to be father of our own self, actually. So it's like, so three things which actually just walk in as extremely participatory in terms of one of the things which will come into the next slides is about talking about participation, how we bring those elements in the work. The second thing is ethical practice in terms of talking about people, value systems, also people who are working with us. So now we have like two studios. One is mostly a research-based studio where we are sitting, and the other studio is what you saw. And these are very important, spaces where we actually develop our ideas with the people, and analytics, information design, and the research. And of course, the third thing we constantly jump on aesthetics, look into Western history, and kind of contextualize our own work through that viewfinder. One of the things about the participation and inclusivity was our projects which we've been trying to build with the communities, with all marginalized, invisible, plus at the same time, the urgent issues which are actually handled. One of the things is our ongoing work with farmers in India. And if you've heard of it, there is this world's largest protest which is going on till now. It's been 10 months. It is about the farm laws. And through our work capacity, we engage with these people in different time zones, in different timelines of it. And it's been now, 8 years of constantly being in touch with them. And also not just tokenizing the idea of talking to farmers, but also using our artistic agency to work with them in some which way. So this video everything is on the YouTube, and you can actually see it on Venue and YouTube. So these are open source films, and has been traveled many different museums. But what it actually talks about is, constantly farmers have been protesting about many different issues, and they wanted to talk about the climate change. They want to talk about the maximum support price, where the government is not really approving it. We can talk more about it, but we wanted to actually tell you that how we actually use this kind of an urgent example into a space design.
And in this, you see the 100 points which farmers are facing every day. It's not only India, research has happened in India, but these 100 points are faced by across the world by the farmers in agriculture.
So in terms of mapping the entire work, so the first step is definitely, you can easily mirror it up with any design intervention or human-centric design exercise. But this is for all the design students out there. So you see what is happening is that we normally have compartments of this is art and this is design and this is architecture. But if you actually talk about it, it is talking about human condition, it is talking about urgency, it is talking about many different factors which actually seem horizontally align with all the kind of subject matters. This is one of the examples where we are talking about social political issues, talking about climate change, and then using our family histories about sports and wrestling into a space of a meditative space, like a gallery space. Now, what happens here is we normally have been saying that farmer is a wrestler. Farmer is wrestling with invisible consequences, and eventually he will leave. Eventually he will lose to the entire exercise. You can well imagine, and in every country there is a changing behavior. the corporatization of it. At the same time, the farmer at the ground level is always been now challenged and fighting for his survival. So let's try to mirror it up onto a wrestling ground where the participant who actually walks in gets a leaf as this person, that's me, has the leaf on within his hand and he's trying to read, and I'm trying to read the pointers. And as in when I connect and create a move, that is one of the primal move in wrestling. Wrestling and farming are very much connected in India, and I hope there is this references to all across the world, which is to do with the grassroots level sports. They both are played in mud. They are having a very spiritual and cultural relevance to it. Both of them have been a part and parcel of from history. History of grain starts with many different things, but also like lands up into sporting events and gala events and to kind of celebrate land and power. And again, we use these things to make it more participation as we bring kids, all sorts of demographic, actually, not just the kids, but all sorts of age groups, and ask them to try their hands and become a living in sculpture in between. This is Yorkshire Sculpture Park exhibition, which happened 2 years back. And the entire canvases all across UC are spin-off of the same mat. So the circle is the yellow circle. The larger canvas in UC at the back is one of the things right behind the kid in the blue. So you can well imagine how these things are then, the research, empathy, and then the intervention in the studio happens where we actually try to make the logic of all these things together and spin it up onto the canvas.
So I like to add, like when you talk about the personal histories of our family histories, so my father still owns a wrestling ground, which is there from last 75 years after the partition when the India and Pakistan was divided. So that we still have that the wrestling ground, which is the idea was for them to run the same traditional way. Don't make a building on that. So there we were coming from and making the competitions every year and participating in the local cultural thing and understanding in our point of view and then putting into our own work as showing our the idea of what we can do to communicate to general people. How can they understand what are the problems faced by different aspects of by the game?
So these are important family histories. We often forget that our parents have actually spent so much hardships to so that we can reach here and talk to you guys. And probably this is where we actually go back to the roots. We travel all across the world, but we come back, and this is something really interesting for all of us that you have like 2 lives, and you realize about the second once you realize that there is just one. In terms of this is after 40, we just turned, so this is like midlife crisis. It is interesting because when you're talking about serious subject matter, you also need to have empathy and have that ability to understand these things. So the idea of talking about really tough matter, like this is a person who we've actually filmed, and he's the person who's been going to different villages to collect the death reports, as the government actually doesn't do it because it changes their entire idea of being happy farmers. So there is this. So
I just like to add this. So why he's collecting the data of the farmers? So the farmers who are doing suicides. So as per the Google data, every 40 minutes, one farmer is doing suicide in India.
This has been the statistics is quite devastating. And then the next work after this is about that. But what you see, this person has actually seen so much of pain and so much of real life and he's the first man whenever there is a death happens, and he will actually go to the family and report. And then this is his Excel sheet right at the back. And this is a video which actually goes for like 30 minutes, where the data keeps coming down. And so this work is basically talking about an automated spray, which is basically a blue ink, and sprays onto the reports where it has been submitted to the government. From last 14 years, people have been waiting. The government of India has not given attention to the reports where it talks about that how urgently you need to really change the farming and the systems and how you actually operate these things. So throughout the exhibition lasted for 45 days. There was this spray which was done after every 30 minutes. And it is an automatic, simple machine. The production cost is really low, but the impact which it created was quite interesting, that the work actually was seen by many people, and then the work constantly keeps traveling. So there are serious issues, but how you can actually spin the entire view on the urgency of it, that's something was very important to us. And something similar to words from the vocabulary, as we were saying initially, that we are using many different vocabularies to challenge ourselves. So across understanding of, this is for us, it's not across it is a multiplication sign, where we are talking about the debt is growing exponentially. And this is how the exhibition is laid down. There are different mathematical calculations and different abstractions turned into sculptures, which are then kept on the floor, and each and everything weights very high. Now, why am I telling you all these tiny details of it? Because every tiny things to a very large space, it matters to us. And since we are actually also designed this entire PDF for students, in keeping in mind, so that they understand that how much tiny details are important, and you cannot ignore the tiny picture and looking at the larger picture. In this show, everything was hanging. So we tried to, as the fate of the farmers are hanging, they're in a limbo. So we tried to hang all the canvases suspended up, not framed it properly. Why did we try to choose this subject in a space, in a gallery, where normally people just come and buy the artwork, but also using the opportunity to talk about tough questions, raise issues, talk about our own systems, and then creating a safe space for talking about these things. These are essentially very important exercises for us. I mean, everybody can actually make pretty paintings and sell, but also at the same time, one has to constantly look and push themselves. Looking into the ideas of care, we did one of the projects. It talks about the memories and emotional mapping. Now, this exercise is about a person walks in and writes a tiny text on a paper and tries to shred it. From these are pasta shredders, which you normally use it at kitchen. We try to turn it into a device where it is a cathartic process to wind it out. And a person writes the memory, writes any kind of a statement, and marks two predominant emotions which are prevailing in the text which he wrote. Those have, each and every emotion have a color coding, and then we try to make a cement tile out of it. Now, these tiles are produced in front of them with the person, and the very interesting thing is that we've got very funny and emotional reactions. We did this 5 times by now. And every time we do it in a different city, we can actually map the emotional quotient of the city. We call it demographic of the city rather than a demographic. And if you see each color actually talk about a certain nature of subject. So the yellow is for being happy, for example, and the black is sadness. The white is unconditional love. So each coding is then produced. Whatever the person has written gets solidified forever. We don't read it. It is also a point where it becomes an image bank of people who participate.
So we named this project called Memory Bar. So it's like archiving of your memory. So people were coming and depositing their memory. Then we were solidifying and making a solid object for them, which they only make themselves.
And eventually it becomes like an installation of like, different emotions. There is not kind of like challenging any demographic, no gender, no nothing, in terms of like, it all comes together as sounds echoing. And we actually thought that the word echo, while you were presenting, it was quite interesting, because for us, echo is it in our paintings, which we actually try to see it. And at the same time, even in this project, especially that, once you actually walk into a silent room with so many people have actually used and walked in to develop these things, it becomes really emotional for us to kind of be in that room. So, as you said that both the people play with and people work with different kind of an understanding of it. For us, it was more of like changing the norms, try to open up things which are given to us. Like who designed the table tennis table, for example, is just a question. We did the research, but we never actually could find the real thing. Of course, there are things about that this was a parlor game, and it is an exercise where it is a miniature version of a badminton or a lawn tennis, and then it was supposed to be played on a table with the cork balls and then with books and paddles. We actually go back to the time where it was actually built. So we did a couple of projects where arguably it was built by Britishers when they were here in India and by the East India Company. And then it finally, once it was given a status of table tennis, and it was then spread to East a little. And then, so that's where the entire thing looks like right now. I mean, there is a research which is happening over the table tennis. Plus, at the same time, while we speak, we use these modules, we call them, to talk about many different things in life. This is an exhibition in Kazakhstan, where Kazakhstan is battling with this changing identity. And we landed up talking to a couple of university faculties, and then finally landed up making a conversational piece over a play. So there are 3 tables, as you see in the next slide. And but let me just focus on one to begin with. So this is a table manners. That's the entire exercise of it. People try to change the names, but there are 2 languages which is going, the traditional, the local language, and then the Russian. And there is this entire idea of generation loss, and the knowledge loss is because more and more Russian is walking in. But any which way, we will not go into the detail of it. But rather, we made it like a conversational piece where the person plays from one side and the other one cannot hit hard. He just have to pick it and do a question session. And then it moves into the second table. And then, so the entire conversational table manners, it's also like how you actually talk to people in a digital age on a WhatsApp. So the first was typing. The second table is seen. The third table is deliver. So that's how we actually coded up. And then we had to actually write it in all 3 languages, Kazakh, Russian, and then English. Entire exercise became really engaging, that people, it kind of like pushes you to the normal comforts of playing a game which you already know, but also pushes you to think how differently these things can actually open up new dialogues and new environments of care. This is a very old project of ours, very close to our heart. This is New Delhi, and one of those local bazaars, local shops, like a fest, happens every week. I'm sure it is in all the cities and all the suburbs. That you actually, people come on the roadside. So this is for middle class people can actually just go there and buy the trousers and buy the dresses and buy briefcase and buy toys for a really cheap price, inexpensive. I should not using cheap. And right in the middle, you spend like inexpensive ticket to get to the and take a booth. And we try to talk about how to have safe sex. These are flip-flops, which actually illustrate how to wear condom illustrations. Plus also at the same time, this was one of the research projects. So this project is like the first project which we actually understand that how a studio can operate. It is to do with social design, participation, and then seeing this as a work of art. We couldn't stop placing it into a gallery as well. What this actually project did was we landed up talking to more than 10,000 people over 5 years. And we printed, I don't know how many times, the flip-flops, which actually went to many different countries, talking about how to have safe sex, using alternate medias to kind of talk about something which is culturally tough to speak. Like these are the people who we can't actually talk about, but we actually got gathered NGOs, and we gathered with people who can actually talk on the ground level in their own dialect. So as in people really feel connected to the subject matter, and a very heavy and urgent response can be given. And of course, it was awkward to begin with, but people still getting a value of something very different. And this is completely like this, the people here are not prepared for this kind of subject matter. How do you use these interventions to bring knowledge systems and bring some kind of a important urgent message across? So this is something which we are really keen on listening from you as students, plus also and faculties, definitely, you know, like how in what examples have you actually seen in different parts of your own experiences to share these things will be really, really lovely. We also turned that similar exercise of talking about safe sex practices in an art fair model. Now here you can see the audiences are college going, people who attend fairs, people who attend art fairs. This is again in New Delhi. These are constant experiments to talk about using sport as a comforter, and then talking about something completely urgent and tough subject matter. And these are the spaces where you actually have to develop to kind of see how it works. You want to see it as a performance, you want to see as a space design, you want to see as a sculpture, or you want to see as a design intervention. It is up to you. So this is where it actually blurs lines of disciplines. It breaks barriers from that, who tells us what kind of information we have to give at what place. So you take control of certain situations. Of course, you have to be respectful. You have to be really sensitive about subject matter. Using the cues, you can actually do a lot. You can modify. And one of the books which we've been producing by now, it is not yet completed, is to do with how sports is an essential ingredient in terms of learning, and how can we actually modify it to bring in social commentary out of it.
So that game talks about having a safe sex and getting information to people without, so using a ball and using the stick, and how to make a understanding of the safe practices.
Just another version of, we actually stepped ahead of what is game design can do. So this is just one of the games which we've been actually playing with people. Both the games talking about our lives and how it matters in today's sort of a point. So one of the games is Walk of Life 1 and Walk of Life 2. One talks about our history, mythology, and how we actually are placed today. The other one talks about water crisis. This is more on, you can see that it is way back in early years, but the climate crisis is actually shown in here in a very different way, that there is a collective reservoir in the middle. You drink the water as you lose from the card, as this woman is reading a 3+ card. So for example, that you're an active person in your city and trying to do something about climate change and water, and you throw a gala dinner to arrange funds for it, and eventually making a lot of garbage junk for people to recoup with, meaning that what you've actually done. So situations like this, like which we forget, that yes, I'm doing something about green, but I need to really have, unknowingly what you're doing. So the entire game design is built on real consequences, real situation, real experiences. And eventually a person drinks the water, and you see there is this markings on the glass. And every time you lose, you have to drink a sip. So the entire exercise can actually be like, if I am in North America, maybe I can talk about issues which are persistent and constantly relevant to North Americans. Or if I want to do it in Japan, maybe I can talk about issues related to water, which are more centric in their part of the world. So constantly changing the narrative, but at the same time using the same game mechanics as the spine of it. Eventually, we landed up producing the board game, which was a performative game, to a smaller scale, and to a point where we now see it as a little pack, which can be then bought from toy stores. This is very important for us to understand that how people experience. So if everybody can't come to the gallery spaces or to our exhibitions, we developed another way to reach up the artwork, which can be then collected by people all across the world. Something very similar here. This is again a full-blown scale of an exhibition. It is about Sikhism, a religion which our parents actually come from, and something which is very basic. It talks about journeys of Guru Nanak, one of the lords, and what we try to build in has a two-way conversation. One is this very large scale of experience you can actually play. At the same time, a smaller version of it, which can be then bought. The entire exercise or the studio practice then eventually lands up into empathy. Also, we've evolved in terms of where we started, and we hope that every project which we do has a capacity to learn more, to observe a little more, so that we can actually bring hope and optimism, to develop a larger ecosystem in terms of sensitivity, human care, and at the same time to push people to think in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your conference. Agradecemos a Jiten Thukral y Sumir Tagra por su interesante conferencia y también a Norma Hidalgo Arevalo Jaramillo, quien es profesora de la Vicerrectoría de Formación Integral de la UDEM y nos apoyó con la interpretación a la lengua de señas mexicana, y a María del Socorro Pérez Garza, quien nos apoyó en la traducción de inglés a español. Muchísimas gracias, Norma y María del Socorro, por este apoyo a hacer nuestra conferencia aún más inclusiva. En este momento comenzaremos con la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Les agradecemos hacer uso del chat habilitado en esta sesión para realizar sus preguntas. Ya tenemos aquí un par de preguntas. We already have a couple of questions here for you in our chat, and I hope a lot of the students and everyone that's watching the conference can send us their questions. And the first question is, who decides what type of narrative is used? Customer, public, or designer?
So there are two ways to see it. If you're working for a brief, you have to actually understand the brief and see how much you can respond to it, in what integrity. I think one of the things which in the second is when you're working on your own personal project, when you're blessed with that there is no client on the top to tell you that to match your sofa with one particular, don't match it with his jacket. If there is a client, then you actually work around the brief. If there is not, you have to work with your own integrity. To be honest, both the elements by now has constantly changing its meanings. You know, the moment we actually understand about the climate change and the social repercussions of it, or the larger net zero, you constantly shift from the old ways of practicing. And this is something, even there is a client or even there is no client, you know. So we hope we have answered your question.
Thank you. The next question is how important it is to use the Pantone colors of the current year on your designs.
So yeah, we can understand that this question has kind of a relevance when it comes to the industry. But since we don't really work within the industry so much, in terms of that we don't really have to answer and follow the trends, we constantly check our things with our most relevant ideas and how it takes the real life. So the answer is that we don't really see the Pantone shades of the year, but you may have to if you're dealing with certain kind of an audience.
Perfect. Another question is how it was to work with a theme such as sexuality. That's such a taboo nowadays still, and talking about the impact this theme have.
So for both of us, things have been, in terms of how we actually see the project, we also saw the project, the project can actually have growing understanding of it. Every project when we do, there is a timeline to it, as we constantly talk about that time owns the idea rather than we both owning or who owns the idea, who came first. This is something which happens actually in 2006 and till 2009. And at that time, the idea about sexuality and body, specifically in India, because the research happened here, was very different than what it is today. It was very close-minded. There was talking about the body and sexuality and being body positive was not so much allowed, and in terms of being open. And how we were actually seeing was that placing a design intervention, we were placing it as an object which can actually pass the knowledge. And the knowledge is irrespective of the changing climate or irrespective of the demographic can actually still work. But when we do the project now, it also does changes its tone, but the idea of safety and hygiene stays, you know. So it does move on to another decade of intervention, but something which is to think about.
Thank you. And we have a question from Fabian Ramirez. Of all the projects you have done, which of those did you like the most? Which project
probably,
is your favorite?
Yeah, the favorite is the one which we are currently always working on, something new. So that's something really close to our heart, that we have to give a proper form. We have to handle our mood swings. We have to find out the time from our families to work on these things. So this becomes something, but I think to be honest, the farming project is something very tough and urgent. And we are very happy that at the right time, we were there to voice it out in a way. So I think it is to do with the urgency and relevance rather than the favorite of it.
Okay. And the next question is from Christian Almaguer. I enjoyed your work and wanted to ask if recognition is a focus on your work.
Recognition, meaning, so that, I mean, I think we just constantly, whatever we understand from the question, I think both of us are constantly aware that we have to constantly push the subject matter and to learn at the same time. More than anything, we have to actually keep ourselves relevant. And so we are actually doing machine learning. We are learning new softwares. Every Saturday is our learning day. We constantly get onto a new software to learn and to code at the same time, because it is very important for us to understand how next 10 years will walk in. So these are very important elements.
And we have a question now from Raúl Amezaga Martinez. Do you prefer working digital or by hand?
So like you see the painting behind us, so that's by hand. But to come to this level, we made digitally first. So we are comfortable with both. So it depends on like what we are working on.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Hi, we have a question now. Yes, Zoom always have this. We were missing this phrase now. We have a question from Ignacio Fernandez. What would you think is the biggest challenge for the artists that want to break the geographical, political, cultural, etc. frontiers for art and design to expand and reach its limits?
Yeah, very important question, actually. Thank you. See, there are different ways to see it. When you begin your local artist, then you become, you take another step forward. You are then talking about representing a state. Then you're representing, after some time of practice and constantly being active, you are recognized as from the country. And then you constantly work to kind of raise up more and actively work and spend time. But, end of the day, what are you trying to achieve? And that's something which everybody will have different answers altogether, because it is a personal question. I think it is both of us are trying to bring many relevant questions which we constantly talk to or question our own self. And something which is very important about how our life is going to be for next 10 years, number one. So we are working on a game design called 2030. So we are teleporting whoever plays the game goes to next 10 years and then come back to today's sort of timeline. So trying to talk about future in speculations, how we can actually make modalities which are more acceptable, the decentralizing issues, something which you've been hearing all across. I think the point is that do not sit comfortable. I think that's where, to expand our limits is that rather than having a lot of money or any showing in different universities or different museums, I think more or less it is to do with getting the word out and constantly keep doing the things that you wanted to do.
That's very good advice. We have another question from Jesus Luis Canizales Oldalde. Good morning. One of your projects that involved children from the audience getting to interact with one of your work pieces caught my attention. What made you think of the idea of involving the children's creativity in that piece?
Yeah, so the one which had wrestling mat on the floor was open to everybody. That including, elderly people can also participate, because physically we did not challenge so much. Bringing middle-aged people was also important for us. But the target was also to kind of have children to come and interact with the spaces. Something which is really urgent, they need to be aware of from all the aspects. It is just not about India, but there are issues in farming in every country. And if we can educate children to be sensitive enough to understand these things, we are educating their parents at the same time. And children by far are much more because their habits are developing at the same time. And this is something really important to us because we have our own children. So it is important that we can actually look into an inquiry-based curriculum rather than just giving to them books. And this is something really important for us, that whenever we are designing a project or a game or something, that we do 8+ and have the languages in different versions so that they can be accessed to.
So not only this project, I just want to mention that another project we did called Made in India.
Yeah.
So that project was involving people. So when there was the image of country, and we were being as artists going exhibiting in different other countries, and the image of India. So what they think, and a lot of questions asked to us: is this India? Like, do you have snakes on the road, or the cows on the road, or all kind of questions like when asked. So we were like realized we have to make a project to educate the younger children there across the world, so they know this is not India. Like, India is different, or is the same, but you are having, we have everybody have everything same, mostly, I mean. Yeah. So but talking about the cultural also. So we made a project, every kid get a frame and they get stickers, so they can make their own stories around India. So that was a project which went to 4 countries. It had more than 400,000 people participated in that project.
So it's basically also breaking away from how you disseminate the knowledge system and how you can actually bring the family close to you. And these are early memories which are then injected in your head forever, Yeah.
Now we have a question from Silvia Elizabeth Medirichaga Adauto. Let me try to translate here. Hi, your work is very interesting. How do you take creative decisions between you two? Is that any of you had to sacrifice an idea for the greater good of a project?
Yes, we're 2 people with different 2 ideas, how to approach, but also it is very easy by now that it becomes like when you work with a person for so long, you exactly know how the person will react and behave. But also we've never said no to each other. The other person takes the lead and the other one will just join in or support. But it is also that it is always important for us to respect each other's idea at max. And of course, we'll have different varieties of he wants to do it this way, I want to do it in that way. But on a larger good, as Sylvia is asking, I think that is important for us to talk about which form will matter the most. So, and then that's how we choose and move ahead. Alexander, you're mute.
Again, okay. So Sylvia is saying thank you for answering her question. And we have another question from one of our professors, Arne Riskins, saying that I saw some similarities to the art of Dali. How would you apply the surrealism in architecture?
Oh, very interesting. Thank you. No, there is, there are, I mean, we've always liked Dali. I mean, who is not actually? But while we are working, we don't really have any preconceived ideas that we actually have to bring in some kind of a Western history and kind of like respond to it. It actually has happened in a way that imagining we've been trying to develop, we also see that the entire history, the entire portfolio of the works can be seen as a larger book making, and then each page is like a slice of, each painting is a slice, like one of the pages of this. But the spaces have been, there is a lot of science fiction at the back of our mind, but also built by hand, like it is a not very techno-oriented fascination of it, but it is also like a very low-key, low technology oriented, and most of the works does have that kind of a sense which we feel. But we feel many important elements can be then have different references to René Magritte at the same time, but not necessarily thinking about these things quite essentially when we are working, but maybe the color palette, or yeah, there is.
Okay, we have another question from Lailet Guevara. What kind of topics or projects you would like to do later?
Lailet, it is to do with public engagement. At the same time, we are trying to build something online, completely digital projects, so that it can be participation from all across the world. And we've been trying to develop on machine learning, that how we can actually create a tiny code which can then spread and then develop into a monster in a positive way. But also being aware that how the participation in these objects placement is really key for us. Also voicing out. So yeah, there are many interesting projects which are there in our minds while we talk, but yeah, all in the pipeline.
Perfect. And we have one last question from the audience, from Andrea Sanchez Cordova. Hi, what are your ideas upon the concept of identity in your work nowadays?
Well, to begin with, as we said that, people actually question constantly that what is Indian about it. And that's something to us, it actually is harder to explain, because we actually have to go back to many different things in terms of that we've actually born and brought up in India, doing things in India, studied in India, working with people and communities in India, and speaking in English, which is kind of like a second mother tongue to us. There is a lot of urgent matters which we actually talk about, which is to do with the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia. So, I mean, how does, while the internet has opened up all the boundaries as we are speaking to you live, how does one identity eventually matter? So I think a lot of time we spend in Germany doing projects, and all across, end of the day, what are we left with a global citizen rather than being tagged as just an Indian, duo working onto oil on canvas and trying to find out their way out, So it is to do with global citizens, actually. And that's where the identity in our next, future is that everybody becomes a global citizen, of course, born to an Indian father and a mother, and being operated in some part of the world. So that's where we think. What do you think?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have a couple of more questions here at the chat. And I think they're very important nowadays. And one of those are how your work changed since the pandemic, from Natalia Quejanos Lopez. That's yes. Very relevant to know relevant. Nowadays.
Yes, absolutely. So we've been talking about the COVID adaptability in all the aspects, that the questions, what lifestyle changes you have actually made after understanding that this is not working, and something which has walked into many different ways of manifesting. One of the things was that we've actually cut down on travels completely. Of course, travels are now open from last 6 months, but there is no traveling until it is very much needed. We're trying to understand how much optimum digital wellness can be, that how much time are we spending on our screens and how much time are we relevantly working in our day. There is a timeline. We have said no to projects which involve more rigorous timeline on digital. We've also spending time more with our own families and more in the studio as and when working. Plus at the same time, many different ways of that when you actually order food or where the food is coming, you constantly just do, we have Zomato, I'm sure you have some Kangaroo or some other food panda who actually delivers, Food Panda delivers all the food. But we need to really question that where it is coming from, all the ghost kitchens. So basically, there is no end to these inquiries. How much green you can eat while you're sitting in air conditions, what kind of impact are you creating? So these are the things which we all have to constantly think of. So everybody has read so much about climate change, from the best of words to a local farmer telling you about that this is the impact. And of course, the COVID constantly drifted our lives in a different way altogether. So yes, there are very conscious changes. We know that life would not be normal. And especially for the younger children, the class of 2020 or people who are actually attending, there'll be a constant change in terms of sitting all across the world and attending the online sessions. So yeah, we're also learning as everybody else is learning.
Thank you. And now for the real last question, that I think it's a compliment for this one. As an artist, how do you balance art in your life? Do you have hobbies, or how do you manage to not be consumed by your own work?
We are consumed by our own work. Artist has this bad problem of being self-obsessed. We are very aware. So the moment we have our timelines, we have alarms in our systems that if we spend more time, we constantly push the other person to get out of the studio and find a hobby and read the book and kind of go and do nothing. But from last 2 years or 18 months, we've been very cognizant about it. Before then, we were also racing and running around like everybody else ran around. So yeah, let's see how next 4 years or 5 years actually looks like. So thank you for the question. Actually, it's very interesting.
Well, thank you so much for the conference and for answering all those questions. So I'm going to finish here with thank you to everyone that participated here and in Spanish. La Universidad de Monterrey a través del Centro Roberto Garza Sada de Arte, Arquitectura y Diseño, agradecen la participación de todos los alumnos, profesores, comunidad en general y directivos que hacen posible este evento. Nos vemos en la próxima conferencia el miércoles 22 de septiembre, la cual será impartida por Marisa Chentacul. Nos vemos el miércoles. Hasta luego. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us and all the best.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you. Take care.